Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all okay. I'm working from home as I usually do, and I don't know whether you can hear the birds in the background on this podcast, but I've got trees at the back of my house and they're full of birds at the moment, and they're all just singing their little hearts out, which is wonderful. It's just such great food for the soul, and I don't know what they're so happy about, but I'm really glad they are because I think they're just like me. They're determined not to let the grey sky get the better of them. There's no sun coming through this morning, and I was very tempted to just have a PJ day because I wasn't planning on going out anywhere this morning, but I was just going to slob around in my pajamas because the furthest I'd planned to go was the end of the back garden. But then I realised that my husband had used pretty much all the milk before he left for the week. So I couldn't exactly really go to the shop in my PJs. I had to get dressed, and so here I am sitting in front of my microphone, having been robbed of my pajama day. But I do still have those sometimes, they're good fun to just be comfortable, and if you don't have to answer to anyone or even answer the door, then it's just wonderful to slob around in your night clothes and be a blob for the day. Be a blob that no one sees. But that's the subject of this morning's podcast, is the sense of invisibility that we tend to feel coming upon us as we go through life and become older women in society. It's a definite thing that we start to feel less relevant. We start to feel that society sees us as less worthwhile, and that can have a very profound effect on a woman and how she feels. And I remember going back to, I'm thinking back now to when I was in my 20s, long before I met my husband and got married. I was a temp and a traveller, and long before I ever went to university. I would just do some temp work, some basic admin or typing or PA work. I would work for 6 months. Then I'd go on holiday for 3. I'd stuff a rucksack full of cheap and cheerful clothing and go backpacking for 3 months. And by the time I came back, everything in that backpack was ready for the bin. So I put everything in the bin and went back to work. And there I was on that cycle. But I got to see a lot of the world doing that. And for the most part, I was pretty happy, and I never really thought much about the future back in those days because it was just something that was going to happen when it was ready. And I imagined that I would be ready for whatever came. But on one of those temp stints that I had, I was doing a lunchtime cover for a woman who'd gone out for lunch. And she came back and she was in a total state. She was literally sobbing and virtually hysterical. And I said to her, "What on earth's happened to you? You were fine when you went out for lunch." She'd left the office as a sunny, smiley, happy lady, and she'd come back in a screaming heap. So we all kind of rallied around her, and we all made ourselves a cup of tea, and we kind of settled down to listen to whatever the hell had happened to this poor woman in the hour since she left the office. But what she said to me had a very profound effect on me. She said, "I feel invisible. I have spent the whole lunch hour out there on the street, walking around, smiling at people, trying to engage someone, trying to make eye contact and give them a smile and get one back, and not one single person acknowledged me." She said, "Even the lady who I bought my lunch from more or less looked over my shoulder while she was serving me. She didn't look at my face. She didn't see me. She didn't even hear me when I said thank you. I feel completely and utterly invisible in the world." And she was in such a state. And it made me think, I was only in my 20s. It never occurred to me that this was going to be a thing. Certainly not for me as I got older, but it just did make me think. And I'm pretty sure that at the time she was representative of a lot of women of her generation. Now, please excuse the bell going on behind me. That's my cat with the bell on his collar, and he's decided that one of his ears is itching. So that's what happens around here. I try to do something semi-serious, and my cats or my dogs will come along and make a mockery of everything I'm trying to do. So whatever noises you hear in the background here, it's just life going on as it is for me in this house with these critters that I sometimes can't decide that whether I love or hate. So anyway, yes, it made me think this woman, she was in such a mess. And one of the other ladies in the office who was of a similar age to her, I think they would have been in their mid 50s at the time. She agreed with her and she said, yes, it's really hard to feel like society is taking us seriously anymore. And it was just a random short conversation that took place in a back office, but it had a very profound effect on me. And a thought went through my head. A thought just shot through my head. I never want to be invisible. And I don't know whether or not that shaped my attitude or my belief in myself. Or, I don't know what it did. But I think on some subconscious level, it has driven me ever since, because I've never forgotten it. I've never forgotten that conversation. I've never forgotten the state that poor lady was in and the impact of that experiment on how she was feeling, because she was probably feeling like that for quite a while, to have gone out and conducted that little self-experiment to try and either prove herself right or wrong. And she proved herself right. She did feel invisible and, not of any relevance to people in the world anymore. And I do think that's a thing. And in modern society, where we're encouraged to ditch our prejudices and talk about things and try and get to a place of understanding where we can appreciate different cultures, different ways of thinking, different ways of operating, and how we spend money, all of that stuff, we are trying to bring everything out into the open, so that the judgment that is driven by ignorance stops being a thing. But I do sometimes wonder if ageism is the last quiet bastion of prejudice that people can safely hide behind, because it's a very surreptitious thing. And I know that I have been refused interviews for jobs based on my age, and I can't prove that, but I know that that's the case. And I think it's one of those things, as we get older, the fact that we have survived so much in the world, that we're still walking forwards, upright, walking forwards with our heads held high, in spite of the crap that we've had thrown at us through our lives, apart from all of the trauma we've had to deal with and all of the experience and wisdom that we've gained through those decades of life. It's probably the most powerful thing that anyone could choose to tap into if they wanted to. And yet the conundrum is that while we have such huge value, we have so much to offer, it's becoming less and less relevant and less seen in the eyes of people who just see us as little old ladies. And it's interesting. On Facebook a couple of weeks ago, I put something on my page. It was a photo of a row of young women in 60s fashion. I think it was a black and white one now, I can't remember, but they were all kind of like dressed up to the nines, Carnaby Street, 1960s, real badass, rocking the fashion, short mini skirts, lovely slingback shoes, beehive hairdos, you name it, they had it rocking, they had it all going on. But you see, those women, they're now in their 70s, and everybody just sees them as old women. And I said, this was our grandmothers once. This is who they were, and they did. They enjoyed life to the full, and they had fun, and they danced, and they sang, and they drank, and they smoked, and they just had a ball. A lot of them did anyway, and they were just living life and having great experiences socially, and great jobs. Some of them too, out in the world, and some of them went on to raise families and. That then went on and did amazing things in the world. So all of those women has a story, and every older person you see walking past you in the street has a story, and it's an important story, and it's a valuable story, because there's so much in those decades of life that are worthwhile and relevant and salient and of value to anyone who chooses to listen to them. And I think the danger that we are now kind of facing is the fact that because society sees us as irrelevant, we start to feel irrelevant, and we start to see ourselves as not worthwhile. So we kind of lose our voice a little bit as we get older, which I think is a terrible thing. And, this is the time of life where we have the most to give, because we've had the most life on earth. We've had the most experience. We've seen more in our decades of life than most people would even comprehend. And there's just so much there that if we all sat down and wrote a memoir, we'd never get to finish it, because it would just be too big, wouldn't it, if we wanted to put everything in there that had been an important thing in our lives, or something that we'd learned from, or something that we'd achieved. And I really do think that we need to shake ourselves up a little bit on this and go back to kind of being the visible people, the visible women that we deserve to be. And it's not just for women too. A lot of men feel frustrated because they've had a lot of life experience too. They've had years in the workforce. Some men, just like women, they've had extraordinary careers, and they have so much in conversation to sit down with in the pub or just anywhere and talk about things, but nobody gives them that opportunity. Nobody notices them. Nobody stops and says, hey, look, what's this guy's story? Or what's this woman's story? Look at her face. She has wrinkles. She has laugh lines. Maybe her hair is going a little bit thin. Maybe she's worried about that. This is a human being with issues, with feelings, with experience, with wisdom, and has so much to offer me as a young person. I would like to kind of pay more attention to that. And that this isn't happening, but I think part of the reason why it's not happening, and you might not agree with me on this, but as a social scientist, I have seen a lot of this, and I've heard a lot of women say that they feel invisible in society. But my rejoinder to that is, well, what are you doing about that? If you want to be invisible, that's fine. And I think a lot of people do, and I think there's real respect to be had for that, especially women who've maybe been in the public eye for a lot of their lives. Maybe they do want to just shut the door and have no one notice them for a change. And a lot of people say to me, I would like to have financial independence, but I never want to be famous, because I think that's too far the other way. And, anyone who chases fame is more or less selling their soul. I think I don't want to be famous. I want to be appreciated and respected and validated like anyone does. And we all deserve that, I think, but we have to claim it. That's the thing. We have to claim this. We can't just sit there and assume that people are going to see our worth, see our value, tap into our wisdom, ask our opinions on things that we are very well qualified, just as experienced people in the world. We are qualified to offer insight, but no one asks for it. And I'm not suggesting that we kind of stand up and go out there and just force ourselves down people's throats. I mean, that's never going to get us anywhere good. But I think it's perfectly acceptable. And I actually think it's important that we stand up and let our voices be heard, that we say, no, it's not okay. You don't get to push me to the side, because I have something valuable. I'm a worthwhile person with a worthwhile perspective. And if I want to wear my orange trouser suit with my pink sparkly shoes, well, I'm going to do that, okay? And I'm not going to care whether or not you think I should do it. It's all about being visible in the way you want to be. You want to be comfortable, but if you want to be visible, you have to work at that, because it's an overarching phenomenon. Because even in certain cultures where the elderly are revered, they are still very much in the background. Maybe not so much within their families, like the matriarchs will always come first in certain cultures, and that's the way things are. But in Western society, where most of the women, I think, that are listening to my podcast are in Western society, even if they're not Western women themselves, they're operating within that culture. And that culture, Western culture in particular, seems to relegate older people to the scrap heap a lot more than they should, or a lot more than they ought to, because of what we have to give. And stand up and be counted, I guess, is the message, really. And that's one of the things that I put a nod to as well in my books, especially in my Teapot Cottage novels, that are mostly aimed at women over 40. I mean, anyone can read them, because there's characters of both genders and all ages in these books, and the stories are relevant to the world and to everyone in it. But I think they are generally more received by women sort of 40, 45 plus. And they are in the age group that suddenly starts to feel over time that they're less relevant. So I make a point in these books of concentrating on the older women and giving her a voice in a book, even if it's only at a coffee morning and she's talking about herself, or she's talking about her husband, and she's talking about her kids and her life, and the things that she's done. There's one woman in there, Peg Tripper, who's a widow. Her husband died young in a car accident, and she's talking about how she pulled her life back together and made a niche for herself. And this is, women are doing all sorts of extraordinary things at all sorts of extraordinary ages. They're picking up pieces, they're moving on, they're putting shattered lives back together, they're quietly getting on, building wonderful careers, doing what they can to put financial security in place for their families, all doing extraordinary things that no one's even noticing because they're older. It doesn't seem to be worthwhile to the younger ones who think they know better. It doesn't occur to the younger people. And I mean, I'm not talking teenagers here. I'm talking even just people just a couple of decades younger. It doesn't seem to occur to them that we've still got so much to offer, but not just that, also that we need to still feel relevant. Like with the Teapot Cottage stories, women talk about all kinds of things. Older women, they're in business and they're doing stuff and they're planning holidays. I mean, it's a lot of it is mundane, average, everyday life, but it's life and it's going on. And I write for the older women because I want her to appreciate the fact that I appreciate the older woman. I mean, God, let's face it, I'm an older woman myself. So if I don't appreciate myself, no one else is going to, are they? And that's the thing. We have to put ourselves out there. If we want to not be invisible, we have to get the sleeves rolled up and figure out a way to be visible. We can't just expect it to come, because it won't in our culture. And I see you. I'm sitting here in front of my little black blob of a microphone, and of course I can't see you with my eyes, but I see you. I see every last one of you with my heart, and I'm so grateful that you have taken the time to listen to me and my rantings on podcast life. And I know I haven't really got much of a voice for radio, but I just really want to reach out and connect with other women who feel like me. And I'm not an invisible person. It's very, very rare that I'll go out and not be complimented on something, whether it's my hat or my coat or my shoes or my handbag. I have developed my own style over the years, and I think that's probably like a subconscious thing that, I've never consciously gone out of my way to be or look like anything. I've just kind of bumbled along and gone with what felt right. But I think on a subconscious level, that conversation in that office that day, all those decades ago, has been a driver for me in just kind of being the person that I am, who just refuses to be invisible. And I went to a party at the weekend, and it was a glitz and glamour party, and we were all, pretty much most of us, were well over 40. And there were some people there who were trans, and there were some people there who were retro, all dolled up, and they all had their sequins on, and they had their fancy handbags, and we all had a really good laugh about all this. And it's like, we don't get the opportunity to do this very often. And I wore a 1920s flapper dress with lots of sequins on it, and a pair of vintage silver low-slung slingback stilettos. And it was an outfit that I'd pulled together from charity shops and Vinted a long time ago. And because that's what I do, I'm not a slave to fashion. I've kind of developed my own style, and I think it's good for women to do that and not kind of get too caught up in wondering too much about what people think. So I mean, if you want to have a purple tracksuit and green trainers, or you want to just dress like whatever you want to do, or say what you want to say, as long as it's not openly offensive to the masses, then just be yourself, be who you are. But just don't accept society's covert trick of pushing you into a corner because that's where you feel you should be. That's I'm going to say it, it's bullshit. There we go. I've said it. I've sworn on a podcast. I almost did a minute ago for any of you that might have caught that. If you're listening, I just stopped myself short. But it really is. It's a pile of old bollocks, what people tell you, especially at this stage in life, what people tell you should be. So if you don't want to be invisible, roll up your sleeves, figure out a way not to be, and just say, look, hey, you don't get to treat me like that. Just because I'm older, it doesn't mean I'm not still of value, because we are of huge value. And with the medical inroads being made that are discovering all sorts of things that are helping us, stay alive for longer, how long do you want to be invisible for? If you've got a decade or more left, or what do you want to do? Do you want to be that person society expects you to be, that quiet, unseen little mouse in a corner, or do you want to step into yourself and be the glorious creature that you are, and leave someone in no doubt about it? It's your choice, really. But you do deserve to shine. You do deserve to be authenticated and validated and seen as relevant and helpful and wise and supportive. And people have a choice about whether or not they accept it, but they can't make that choice unless you put yourself in front of them. So just don't be invisible. It's not okay to be invisible. You deserve so much better. We all do. So let's just go out there and reclaim our place in the world. Don't be invisible. You're anything but. Just trust that. Okay. I'll talk to you soon.